Okay, well, this year unusually, because as you all know, there's nothing usual about this year at all. The fast of the 10th of Tevet coincides with Christmas Day. The fast of the 10th of Tevet commemorates the day that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, laid siege to the first temple in Jerusalem, and it's an event which eventually led to the destruction of the temple on the 9th of Av and the exile of the nation after 850 years of Jewish sovereignty. The 25th of December, Christmas Day, according to the Western Church, is the day in which Jesus of Nazareth was born. And according to the Eastern Church, the date on which he was born was the 6th of January, and that's the date that they celebrate for Christmas. As a matter of fact, before the 4th century, there were at least 18 separate dates ascribed to his birth before the two churches settled on these two dates. And the reason for that is because accurate calendars were simply not kept at that time. But given the huge gulf that separates the event of the 10th of Tevet and the 25th of December, what connection could there possibly be between them? And the answer is more than you think. A Talmudic text lists all the days of the Jewish fasts. There are 3 fasts that are listed in the month of Tevet, on the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, so as not to impose an unreasonable demand on the community to require them to fast 3 days on the trot, something which they knew that people would never do in any event. All 3 fasts were wrapped up on a single day, the fast of the 10th of Tevet. Now, everybody agrees that the reason for the fast day on the 8th of the month was because on that day, at the beginning of the period of the Second Temple, when the Jews were under Greek domination, Ptolemy of Egypt, who was one of the kings after Alexander the Great, ordered 70 Jewish sages to translate the Torah into Greek. And this was the first time the Torah was ever translated into another language. And this was considered by the sages to be a calamitous day, as it's impossible to adequately translate the Torah and was bound to lead to misunderstandings. Everybody also agrees that the 10th of the month is the day on which the Babylonians laid siege to Jerusalem, because that's written in the prophets. But no one knows definitely what happened on the 9th of Tevet that requires a fast. So much so that the Shulchan Aruch says, we don't know what happened on that day. So over the centuries, a number of suggestions have been put forward. The most popular is that it is the day on which Ezra the scribe, who led the people back from Babylon to rebuild the temple, beginning of the Second Temple, and was considered in many respects to be like a second Moses, that this is the day on which he died. But we don't fast on the 7th of Adar, which is the day that Moses died. So why fast on the day that Ezra died? And then we come to Avraham ben Chia, a brilliant 11th century Catalan Jewish mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher, who did some calculations. In his book called Sefer HaIbur, he demonstrates that the 25th of December, in the year that was ascribed by the Christians as the year of Jesus' birth, coincided in regard to the Hebrew date with, yes, you guessed it, Shabbat the 9th of Tevet in that year. And that is why this date was established as a fast date, with the reason withheld. The fast of Tevet, the 10th of Tevet, therefore incorporating the fasts of the 8th and the 9th, is directly connected with Christmas Day. But there's an even more astonishing connection. The story of Jesus, as told from a Jewish perspective as opposed to Christian sources, is contained in an ancient manuscript called Toldot Yeshu. Yeshu is the Hebrew name for Jesus, the history of Jesus. The original manuscript, by the way, is no longer extant, but there were lots of copies, and it was actually published for the first time in print in 1705. But it's clear that Rashi in the 10th century and the sages at the time of the Talmud were aware of this manuscript. And in this history of Jesus from a Jewish perspective, it describes a crisis that arose in the first 100 years after Jesus' birth. Because those who believed that Jesus was the Messiah were at that time still practicing Jews in every other respect. They were praying in the regular minyanim. So the new proselytizing Jews and the old Jews were indistinguishable. And this was considered to represent a mortal threat to the survival of Judaism. So the sages, according to Toldot Yoshu, actively plotted to engineer a clear distinction between the two groups. And one of the sages of that time, Shimon ben Kalpos, was appointed to infiltrate the group. And he did this so successfully that he became the Bishop of Jerusalem and eventually the Pope of Rome. And in the name of Christianity, together with Paul and others, he ditched all of the ceremonial aspects of Judaism, saying that only the 10 Commandments and the Noahide laws were important. And as a result of that, the Christians became a distinct group. And these acts, by the way, of Shimon ben Kalpos are verified in Christian sources as well. According to Toldot Yeshu, Shimon ben Kalpos died on the 9th of Tevet, and a fast was established for the man who, with great self-sacrifice, heroically saved Judaism. But his achievement was an undercover operation worthy of the Mossad, and therefore his name and the reason for the fast could not be mentioned. As a result of these actions, to this day, Jews and Christians remain distinct religions, except that this year we share a day. We to commemorate the destruction of our sanctuary, and they to celebrate the birth of their Savior. We mourn because needless hatred, lack of respect for each other, and a disregard of companionship brought about the destruction. They rejoice because it is a day of family togetherness, companionship, and goodwill towards all mankind. Our religions may be miles apart in their ideological underpinnings and practices, but notwithstanding the many differences, the confluence of our commemoration and their celebration on the same day brings a shared understanding, each in our own way, of what needs to be fixed to create a happier, better, and more harmonious world. Shabbat Shalom.